Hello again. This is Cheryl. I'm your travel coach, and thank you for visiting Travels with the Red Suitcase again today. So we're going to talk about the U.S. State Department and you. Now, the U.S. State Department has multiple functions, and so I'm going to focus on the most important functions for travelers, which includes passports, visas, travel advisories, death and repatriation, victims of crime, and crisis or emergency situations. Because these are extensive topics, I will present them in 3 segments. Since we have been talking about insurance and money, the first segment will continue that conversation with death and repatriation. If you remember, I mentioned repatriation in the last video when I talked about the importance of having emergency medical evacuation insurance. And so this topic will also include financial responsibilities having to do with death and repatriation of a tourist, an American citizen in a foreign country. The second segment will cover passports, visas, and advisories. The third will cover victims of crime, jail, hope you are never there, and crisis or emergency situations. It might be interesting to first look at how the U.S. State Department came into being and its history in relationship to passports specifically. Let's see how much of this you already knew. This government agency is the oldest cabinet-level agency in the executive branch. It was established in 1789 and originally known as the Department of Foreign Affairs because its mission was to focus on trade and commerce with other countries. During the Civil War, under President Abraham Lincoln, William Seward was Secretary of State, and it was Seward who implemented what is now the U.S. passport system to better monitor and detain Confederate sympathizers suspected of seeking contact with foreign nations for financial support. In 1866, with the opening of the transatlantic telegraph, one of my favorite and most interesting subjects, Secretary of State William Seward sent a 23-word message to U.S. envoy John Bigelow in Paris. It took 2 days, and it cost, in today's currency, $300,000. The bill was not paid for 5 years, and as a result, the U.S. State Department quickly created a code for cables that used fewer words. With the beginning of World War II, many European nations suddenly required citizens of every country to have passports identifying themselves. 120,000 Americans found themselves stranded overseas. When then Secretary of State William Jennings Bryan authorized embassies to begin issuing passports, and the U.S. Embassy in Paris, for example, issued by hand 4,500 passports in 1 week. In December of 1914, President Woodrow Wilson was told that the German ambassador to the U.S. had approved forgery and theft of U.S. passports so German spies and combatants could travel through neutral countries to the war zones. During the Spanish-American War in 1936 to 1939, Soviet sympathizers organized and stole 2,000 passports of American volunteer fighters. The passports were shipped to Moscow and reissued to communist intelligence agents. As a result, the State Department redesigned and reissued 2,000 passports to the volunteer fighters. And last but not least, in 1939, the U.S. State Department discovered that a travel agency in New York City called World Tourists was run entirely by Communist Party members who routinely stole and copied passports of American travelers. Well, that's the end of the history lesson and the beginning of real-world information about death, and repatriation of a U.S. citizen in a foreign country. What happens when an American traveler dies on foreign soil? Well, it depends on several things and in no particular order. Is it a natural death or one where a crime was involved? Does the State Department have next of kin information? Has the traveler signed up for STEP? And in what country did the U.S. citizen die? Options available to a family depend on local laws and practices in that foreign country. Every country has its own regulations regarding death and repatriation. For instance, is embalming allowed? Is cremation allowed? And how long after death must the body be interred? Here are some examples of costs and services and reasons why you need emergency evacuation insurance. So, when a U.S. citizen dies in Croatia, the next of kin or legal representative must choose between three options: in local internment or burial, $3,500 or more, depending on the cemetery location. Option number 2, cremation, $2,000 or more, depending on services and location. And number 3, shipment of remains or an urn with ashes to the United States, $3,500 to approximately $8,500, depending on the destination. If you died in Brazil, you can be cremated or embalmed. Fees can include collection and transportation of remains, wood casket, funeral home charges, administrative fees, cremation and disposal of ashes for shipment to the United States, and we're looking at approximately $2,000. So embalming would be $500 US, cremation would be $280 to $560 US dollars, and transportation to the United States from Rio would be $1,300 to $1,500. If you like Asia and you died in Indonesia, the maximum period before internment is 24 hours after death. When embalming has been performed, burial may be delayed for 1 week. Embalming is available, although the quality of embalming as known in the United States is not at that level. Cremation is available, but in some areas, cremation is done on a funeral pyre. The cost of cremation depends on the mode of cremation, oven or pyre, and the type of wood and the thickness of the coffin. Exportation of remains. The casket is anywhere from $1,500 US to $3,000 US dollars. An urn would be $80 to $300 US dollars. The cremation itself would be $500 to $800 US dollars. If the body were to be embalmed, it would be $250 to $400 US dollars. An autopsy would be $2,500. Document prep and handling of shipment of the remains, $300 to $500. The shipping crate, $800 to $900 US dollars. And transportation to the airport by ambulance is $200 to $300. Plus, air freight costs from wherever you are in Indonesia. And some airlines also request fumigation, and that is an approximate cost of $550. You can see by this information that it is not only an expensive situation, but includes a long list of red tapes and hoops through which someone, perhaps you, must jump. Although this is not the type of information you would regularly consider when you are planning a trip, it could be a sinkhole for your family or for you if traveling with a relative. Consider how much more difficult this would be if you were traveling with a friend who, like my friend in Japan, was hit by a car and died and had none of this information on hand. It is much better to have a plan and insurance for this possibility than to have to deal with this on the spot while you are already in crisis mode. I personally travel with an envelope marked "in case of my death" with all the necessary documentation for my host, my friend, or an embassy official. My suggestion is, once again, print out the information for the countries you will be traveling through. Add it to the 3-ring binder you're leaving with your co-pilot and take a copy with you, a paper copy. Although you can, of course, download it onto your phone or tablet. In order to find this information, go to your U.S. State Department website. Look on the top of the page, toward the right, for embassies and consulates. Click on that. A list of countries will appear. Find the country or countries you will be traveling through. Click on the page and look for Services for Travelers, usually on the left. Click on it, and then look down the page and find Death of a U.S. Citizen. Print out the pages. And once again, read carefully, highlight, circle in red, add check marks, and then look at your insurance to see if you are covered and for how much and what is the necessary procedure to get assistance. Hopefully, you will never need to use this information. But again, it is much better to have that plan B than to be stuck in crisis mode, or worse, to be in a financial whirlpool. This is more food for thought. Better to have the knowledge now instead of 2 weeks before a flight or when you are actually in a crisis. Next Thursday, it will be passports, visas, and advisories. Please remember to hit the blue like button and the red subscribe button before you leave. And remember, 52 stories of my 3-year adventure can be found on my WordPress blog, Travels with the Red Suitcase. Please join me next Thursday for part 2 of the U.S. State Department and you for passports, visas, and advisory. And I'm going to leave you with this thought. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. Bye-bye. Have a great week, and I will see you next Thursday. Bye.